Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today, welcome to my reading goals for the year of 2026. So, today I'm going to talk through some reading goals, some reading resolutions I have for 2026. My aim for this year was to have fewer goals, or like fewer number specific goals. But as I started making my goals, I feel like I don't actually have fewer goals necessarily. But I am someone who quite enjoys reading goals. I enjoy the sort of gamification of reading in that way, and I quite like stats and numbers and stuff, and ticking things off, etc. And I also really don't mind, having reading goals that I don't achieve entirely. But I also feel like last year I had a few very specific reading goals which I felt quite focused on and enjoyed, and then I had like a reading goal spreadsheet which I kind of lost interest in by the end of the year. So I'm going to do things a bit differently this year. I have a few reading goals for the year, but I don't have a reading goal spreadsheet. I have a different sort of monthly prompt thing, which I will talk to you about in a minute. And I also have sort of taken the numbers out of most of my goals, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's start off with my sort of TBR related goal. So my current physical TBR stands at 102 books, which is quite a lot higher than it's been for quite a long time. This time last year, I think it was 64 books. And I would say usually my physical TBR stands between sort of 30 and 60 books. And it hasn't been over the 100 mark for quite a long time. I don't really mind having 100 books in my physical TBR, especially as I do feel like my current physical TBR quite accurately reflects my reading taste. I think I spoke about this on Monday when I did my reading stats for 2025 video and my look back at my goals. But I feel like my physical TBR now has a lot more classics on, a lot more international literature, big mix of genres. I feel like this time last year my physical TBR was mostly contemporary historical fiction, and I feel like this year my TBR is not mostly contemporary historical fiction, though that is something I love and I do have lots of it on my TBR. But anyway, I feel like my TBR is a bit too big, both in terms of there being so many books on it I want to read, but also in terms of space. So my physical TBR is across this shelf and this shelf, and that's why we're sitting here. And there is a pile of books on the floor by my chair, well, under my chair right now, but usually it's sort of next to my desk chair. And then there's also a bookshelf just down this direction, which is sort of a coffee table at the top and a bookshelf at the bottom, and that also has quite a lot of books on. So my TBR shelf is kind of taking up quite a lot of space at the moment. I definitely bought a lot more books in 2025 than I usually do. I feel like usually I do acquire quite a lot of books, but I feel like usually the majority of books I acquire are through being sent review copies or Christmas presents, birthday presents, that kind of thing. I feel like usually I don't buy a lot of books, whereas I feel like in 2025 I did, partly because I went to Hay on Wye on holiday and it is a bookshop town, and I bought a lot of books in one go, and I feel like buying 20 books in a weekend, many of which were secondhand, I should add, kind of let loose all my usual restraints about book buying, and so therefore I just bought a lot of books in the second half of 2025. And I also went to quite a few literary festivals and events and stuff where I ended up adding lots of books to my TBR. Anyway, I feel like I just acquired a few too many books in 2025, so I feel like I would like to keep an eye on my book buying more in 2026. I'm not going to put myself on a full book buying ban, because as I said, my idea for my goals in 2026 was to be a bit sort of looser with them, but I am going to try and buy fewer books in 2026. However, the books I want to focus on most from my TBR in 2026 are the books that have been on my TBR for the longest. And so this is my sort of firmest goal for the year, I suppose, with an actual number target in it, I guess. I have picked out the 15 books that have been on my TBR the longest. So last year I did a very similar thing. I picked out the 19 books that have been on my TBR for the longest, and I didn't manage to read all 19. There are 5 books that were in that list last year that I carried over to this year. So I've taken the number down to 15, and I have picked, 5 books that I carried over from last year and 10 new additions to my sort of long-term TBR project, which are these books. So I've put them to be the books that I see first, so that I think about them often. Conveniently, it goes up to the Fellowship of Puzzlemakers, which is just where the camera goes up to, which is quite satisfying. So yeah, so the 15 books that have been in my TBR for the longest, I think. I haven't like precisely worked out when all of them are from, so it might be that there's accidentally a book in my TBR that has been there longer, but I think these are probably the books on my TBR that have been there the longest, which isn't necessarily that long. I don't think any of them have been on my TBR for more than 5 years, and some of them have only been on my TBR for like 2, but I would really like to get to all of these, and they're books that I often think about reading or like put on a TBR or want to read and then don't end up getting to. So those 15 books are The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers by Samuel Burr, The Devil's Finger by Sandra Bond, that's a carryover from 2025, Demos by George Gissing, Bright I Burn by Molly Aitken, More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Guiterrez, which is one of the books carried over, Avoidance, Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs by Jordan Stevens, and then You Don't Know Me by Imran Mahmood, The Undoing of Violet Claybourne by Emily Critchley, A Perfectly Good Man by Patrick Gale, that's a carryover from last year, The Way It Breaks by Loizou, that's a carryover from last year, The Story of the Stone Volume 3 by Xueqin, that's a carryover from last year. Then The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw, The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge, and finally Miss Aldridge Regrets by Louise Hare. So those are 15 books that have been in my TBR for ages that I would really like to read in 2026, and which I'm very excited for. I feel like a lot of those I am very excited for. And there are definitely a few there, like I think Demos, Bright I Burn, You Don't Know Me, and Miss Aldridge Regrets, I have like multiple times put in a suitcase when I go on holiday and then like not got around to reading them. Like I have actively meant to start them really soon so often, and I would like to actually do that in 2026. So that's probably my sort of biggest / most concrete goal for 2026. But I do have a few other goals. So one goal is that I would like to read more new to me Victorian literature. In 2025, I did read like a decent amount of Victorian books. I read 38 things that were Victorian, but 17 of them were rereads. And while I love rereading my favourite Victorian novels, and I am intending on doing plenty of Victorian rereading in 2026, especially of Thomas Hardy, I'm really enjoying taking part in Jen the Librarian's Thomas Hardy read-along. But I would also like to be reading new to me Victorian books because I love Victorian literature. It's an area that I find fascinating, and while I have read plenty of Victorian literature, there's so much more I want to read. And there are a lot of Victorian books that I have been meaning to read for a really long time that I just haven't got to. And that especially happens, I think, with Victorian books that I have on ebook, and so they're not like on my shelf looking at me, and so I don't end up getting to them as soon. So I'd like to try and read more new to me Victorian literature in 2026, and I think there's a few things that will hopefully prompt me to do this. One is that I'm beginning the year with a lot more Victorian literature on my physical TBR, partly because I have recently acquired lots of books produced by Victoria's Archive, who are a publisher who reproduce out-of-print Victorian books. I'm really enjoying these editions, and I now have quite a lot of them on my physical TBR, and I hope that will kind of remind me to read Victorian literature throughout the year. I also still have my Victorian literature TBR jar, which I created at the beginning of 2025 and like barely used. But I still do want to read all the books I've named in here, the vast majority of which I either don't have a copy of or only have a digital copy of. And I'm going to try and pick something from this every month and actually read it this year. Whether or not I succeeded in that, we'll see, but I would like to try. And then I'm also hoping to take part in some of the neglected Victorian bestsellers read along that is being hosted by Roy from Roy Reads Anything. I'll leave the announcement video down below for that if you're interested. I also have a calendar here, which I just had to retype, fell down, which is a calendar Roy made for the neglected Victorian bestsellers read along and sent me a copy, which is very, very fun. And it's got all the different books for every month. And January's book is The Heir of Redcliffe, which I have already read, but I am instead reading December's book, which is Under Two Flags by Ouida, which I've just started because I didn't get around to reading it in December. But I am hoping that I will read not necessarily all of the neglected Victorian bestsellers, but a lot of them, because I feel like they all sound like quite interesting books, and it would be nice to, discover lots of new to me Victorian books in 2026. And then my sort of third reading goal for the year for 2026 is to continue to try and read more internationally. I'm not going to set myself a numbers goal for this year, but I am going to continue to like make a note of every country I read from, and sort of try to read more from around the world. Then my fourth goal, and again, I'm not going to set a numbers goal for this, but I would like to try and read more in different forms, and especially I would like to read more plays and more comics and or graphic novels. I only read one play in 2025, which makes me really sad because I love reading plays. I really, really enjoy reading plays. And somehow that just kind of like dropped off my radar in 2025, and I don't want that to happen in 2026. I have already read one play in 2026. I've already read as many plays in 2026 as I did in 2025. And I hope I will read more because I really enjoy reading plays, and I'm sad that I didn't do that very much in 2025. But I would also like to read more comics and graphic novels, which I've been getting into lately. I also really enjoy reading poetry and short stories, but I feel like I more consistently read poetry and short story collections than I do plays and graphic novels. So I feel like I need less prompting for that. So those are my 4 goals for throughout the year of 2026. But I have also been thinking about sort of monthly goals and monthly reading projects. I really love readathons. I really love taking part in and hosting Victober and Jane Austen July, and I always really enjoy those reading months. I always feel like July and October are the months that I do some of my best reading. And actually December in 2025 as well, where I was doing the TBR Advent Calendar, that month also had like a focus to it, even if I guess the focus was short books, and I really enjoyed reading those books. And I feel like having a sort of like monthly focus is something I quite like. So I was thinking about that, and I've made myself a little like monthly chart. So this is basically like in place of my reading goals checklist spreadsheet thing that I've been using for the past few years. And I'm not going to be ticking anything off on this chart, but I've made myself a sort of like monthly reading prompts chart. I'm not sure how well you can see the one I'm holding up. I've like put it on coloured paper, which seems fun to me, and I'm gonna pin it up on my pin board. I put up a digital version on the screen because I think that'll probably be easier to see, and then I won't have to hold it up. As you can see, this little chart I've made is separated into 2 sections. So the top section is like every month I could read. So this is prompting me to read like a book of this kind or in this category every month, and I don't have to do it every month. It's really optional. Like I said, this is a sort of loose reading prompt thing. To explain the 6 boxes at the top of this chart, the first says one book from Jen and Kerry's TBR reading spa. So Jen the librarian and Kerry Books this year have a really fun reading challenge, but it's not really a challenge, a fun reading spa as they're calling it, where they have sort of questions to prompt your reading every month in a little flowchart, and the idea is to help you pick which books to read from the books you already own, which seems like a really fun thing to do, and I've kind of done for January, and I think that would be a fun thing to do in a TBR video every month, and that would also help me sort of read more from my physical TBR, which, as I said, is feeling a bit bigger than I would like it to be at the moment. The next box is more self-explanatory, 1 or more new to me Victorian books. The next box, again, very self-explanatory, 1 or more books from my long-term physical TBR, which, as I said, is like this section of my TBR shelf. The next box is 1 book in a different form, so that would be a play or a graphic novel or comic or a poetry collection or a short story collection. I guess I would probably count non-fiction in this. Basically something that isn't a novel, although a graphic novel is fine. Anyway, the next box is a work of international literature, and then the 6th box is 3 to 5 theme books. And below, in the next section of this prompt chart, I have monthly themes. So I have 12 themes here, the themes being catch-up month, crime fiction, historical fiction, proof copies, classics of any kind, variety of form, Jane Austen, etc., international classics, sci-fi/fantasy, Victorian literature, post-colonial feminism, and French classics. Some of these are obviously much more specific than others, and these are like things that I want to read more of in 2026, or things that I want to remind myself to read in 2026. And there are 12 of these, and I have placed Jane Austen, etc., and Victorian literature like where Jane Austen July and Victober would come if I was doing them in order, but I'm not going to do them in order necessarily. I'm not necessarily going to do all 12. I'm not going to cross them off like a bingo challenge. I might repeat some, I might not do some at all. But I thought it might be fun to have a monthly prompt where I'm like, this month I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on crime fiction, and I'm going to read like 3 to 5 crime thrillers. So I don't really know how this is going to go, but my general idea is that this little chart will be a sort of prompt for a TBR that I put together at the beginning of the month. And I am hoping I will do a TBR video every month in 2026, because I started doing that at the beginning of 2025 and really enjoyed it and then fell out of the habit of it. But I do really like making TBR videos, and I'm hoping I will do that this year. I obviously didn't do one in January, but the theme for January is catch-up month. So I'm just catching up on all the things I wanted to read in December and didn't, basically. And then in February, I will maybe do crime fiction, maybe do something else. I don't know. Like I said, I have put them vaguely in an order that I might approach them, but I might not. And I may abandon this entirely. It's just a loose prompt. But the idea is, I guess, that in a TBR video, I would look at the top of this chart first and pick like one book for all the things that say 1+, and then I would pick a few books for whatever theme I had chosen that month and have a little like monthly goal. I feel like that'll be fun, but I may not find it fun. I may give up on it, and that's fine if I do. So yeah, those are my reading goals for 2026, and I'm feeling excited about doing things a bit differently and sort of a bit lower key in terms of my goals in 2026, I say with my chart. But you know, it feels like a more relaxed, for me, way of doing reading goals than what I've been doing previously, which I have really enjoyed, but I feel like I've just run out of steam on. Those are my reading goals, but there are a couple of other sort of things around books that I have goals for. I want to kind of rethink how I use bookish social media. Not BookTube. BookTube, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. But, well, I feel like I have really moved away from Bookstagram this past year. I just don't really like Instagram anymore. I used to really enjoy looking at all the pictures of pretty books, and now Instagram is so many videos, there's so many more adverts. It seems to often be lots of stuff from people I don't follow. You can only use 3 hashtags now. I'm just generally feeling a bit fed up with Instagram, and so I've taken it off the home screen on my phone, and I now just like don't scroll Instagram ever, really. I've kind of been umming and ahhing about whether I want to stop posting on Instagram, and I think I probably won't. I do post a lot less on Instagram now than I used to. I think in the second half of 2025, I just kind of mostly stopped posting, or, you know, went from posting like a couple of times a week to like once a month. And I think maybe I will just continue to do that, because I do like Instagram for keeping in touch with people. Like, there's quite a lot of people who I message on Instagram that I don't have another way to communicate with. And it is nice to sometimes give updates about what I'm reading, especially if I want to like shout out a book by an author I've really loved. I can tag them on Instagram and they'll see it, and someone will find them through that, and that's really nice. So I think maybe I will try and do like a monthly wrap-up post on Instagram, and otherwise not really post on Instagram. Or I'll use it more like I used to use Twitter, which I've completely given up on now, and I'll just use Instagram to post like when I have something specific to post, rather than like doing really regular reading updates, which I used to do. So I feel like I'm mostly going to step away from Bookstagram. And then I've also been thinking about Goodreads versus Storygraph. So I've been using Goodreads for a really long time. Everyone has talked about how amazing Storygraph is. So I got a Storygraph account in 2025, and I tried for a while to update my reading on both, and then I basically just forgot to use Storygraph. And Storygraph is also much more complicated than Goodreads, which I know is why a lot of people like it, and I kind of do like that. But also, I kind of just want to leave a star rating on a book. I kind of don't want to like do all the extra stuff, which I know you don't have to do, but it just feels like you're being asked a lot more questions. But I think I probably would like Storygraph if I got into it properly. So I think maybe I will stop using Goodreads to update my reading and only use Storygraph. And the reason why I was using both for ages is because I often leave Goodreads links in the descriptions of my videos, but I don't actually know whether they are useful for people. Are they useful? Because I also leave like affiliate links to bookshop.org, which obviously you could use if you want to use an affiliate link, that's great, but also you could go there to just read the description if that's what you need a link for. So do I need to leave Goodreads links? Do people find them useful? If people do find them useful, let me know and I will continue to do that. But if no one says they do, then I might just stop that and just list the books in the description, and use Storygraph. I guess I could just link to Storygraph. Basically, I feel like I need to either abandon Goodreads and properly move to Storygraph, or I need to forget about Storygraph. Doing both is a bit of a hassle, especially when I also have like a big spreadsheet where I record my reading, and that's like the main way I record my reading. That was a unnecessary ramble, wasn't it? But anyway, would it be a books and things video without a tangent? I also have been thinking that I would like to try and DNF more in 2026. Less because I feel like I've read lots of books lately that I feel like I shouldn't have persevered with, and more because I feel like there's quite a lot of books in my physical TBR, especially books that I have not bought myself but have got for free at literary events and that kind of thing. And I don't pick those books up because I think, oh, well, I'm not sure if I'll like that. And that means they just sit on my TBR for a really, really long time. And I feel like I would get to those books sooner if I thought, well, I'll just DNF them after 50 pages if I'm not gelling with the book. In general, I don't DNF very much at all, but I don't think I actually dislike DNFing. Reminding myself that DNFing is fine might mean I get to certain books on my TBR sooner. So we'll see. I have DNF'd one book in January so far, and it feels kind of freeing. What else do I have to say? Don't really have any channel goals in particular. There are, as ever, videos and things I want to make, and vague plans I have, but in general, I just will be continuing as I have been doing. As a side note to that, if you ever would like to support my channel, I have a Patreon with various tiers. I'll leave links down below. There's a book club, there's Friday Reads videos, and there's just like a tip jar if you ever want to give me a tip. You can also tip on Super Thanks with BookTube as well. And I also have some affiliate links. For ages I was using Blackwell's, which lots of people used, which was really, really lovely. But Blackwell's affiliate system is down for maintenance, as it has been down for like 4 months. And I don't know if they're getting a new system or fixing it or what. So I've moved my links back to bookshop.org. If you ever would like to buy a book that also gives me commission, that would be lovely, but also, you know, no pressure. I also have some writing goals for 2026 kind of in my mind. I am hoping to publish more short stories on my Patreon, which I did last year in October, which a few people bought, which was really, really lovely. It's very hard to get short stories traditionally published, but I really like writing short stories, so I would like to continue to publish short stories through my Patreon. I was thinking that maybe I will release my 1920s rom-com short story for Valentine's Day in February. Yeah, there's a few other stories that I would like to put out there in some way. And for whatever short stories I publish on Patreon in 2026, I will do what I did in October, where I put the short stories up for sale so that you can just buy the short stories rather than having to subscribe to Patreon. If when I publish more short stories on Patreon, I will mention that on this channel too, but that is definitely something I want to do more of in 2026. And maybe I would like to write more short stories as well, because I feel like the short stories I'm like planning to put on Patreon are ones I've like written over the past 5 years rather than like in the last 6 months. But you know, I'm also working on a novel. I mostly write novels, but I do love a short story. Okay, I feel like this video has been much longer than I intended, so I'm going to stop rambling now. I'm excited for my reading goals and plans in 2026. Do let me know if you have any reading goals or resolutions for the year, anything you're hoping to focus on in 2026. And otherwise, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video. Oh no.